There are so many different kinds of Arduino boards out there, so you'd be forgiven for being confused. In this guide, we'll talk about all the different kinds of Arduino available, how much they are, what they're capable of, and which is suitable for your project. This is pretty much designed as a beginner's guide for the sort of person who has just graduated from their starter kit or who hasn't even bought an Arduino yet. I'm hoping to show you what kinds of Arduinos there are and what they're best suited to. First up, the Uno. With clones costing as little as $3, the Uno, while not the first Arduino board, remains the most popular. It's also the model you'll find included with most starter kits. It's the Uno that sets the standard for upgrade shields, boards which can plug onto the top of Arduino to enhance functionality, add features, and they can often stack with each other so you can add more and more of them. About the size of a credit card, it has a full-size USB port and a DC barrel jack accepting up to 12 volts DC. It has 14 digital I/O pins, 5 analog ones, and runs off 5 volts. It can be powered either by the USB cable or by some external power through that barrel jack. At the heart of the Uno is the Atmel 328P with 32 kilobits of program memory, which is pretty small by today's standards, and at some point you'll probably want to upgrade to something bigger. But as a starter device, it's perfect really. Next up we have the Mega 2560, and this is basically an upgraded Uno. If you find yourself running out of I/O pins or memory, but you still want the form factor of the Uno, then you can upgrade very easily to a Mega. Shields can also fit on top of this in the same way that they do with the Arduino Uno. Although twice the price of the Uno at about $6 for a clone, the Mega has 256K of memory, along with a whopping 53 digital I/O ports and 15 analog ports. Like the Uno, it has a full-size USB port and DC for external power. So it's really just useful when the Uno just isn't big enough. Next we have a Pro Micro, this tiny little thing. With clones available for about $3 each, the Pro Micro is both small and has the ability to become a USB human input device like a keyboard or mouse. It has a micro USB port on the side, it runs off 5 volts or 3.3 volts, and of course it's tiny, so it's great for small projects, though this does leave you with a couple less I/O pins to play with. And like the Uno, it only has 32K of memory. There's also a Pro Mini and Nano Arduino available, which is basically the same thing, but without the onboard USB controller. I'm going to skip right over these because if you need them, you probably already know that and you're not really an Arduino beginner. For beginners, I'm definitely going to recommend the Pro Micro, just because it has the built-in USB controller and it can become a keyboard or mouse. And honestly, there isn't that much of a price difference, so for beginners, this is definitely the one I would recommend if you want the tiny form factor. At this point, I also want to talk about a NodeMCU dev board, which is Arduino compatible amongst other things. So while it isn't actually an Arduino, you can use most of the Arduino code on it, although you may need a couple of modifications. Available for as little as $4 each, the NodeMCU board comes with a built-in Wi-Fi connection, which is incredibly powerful for Internet of Things projects that you might want to take on. Just a couple of lines of code and you have it connected to the internet. The only downside to working with the NodeMCU board is that the pins run at 3.3 volts. They're not 5 volt tolerant. So if you have a sensor which is outputting at 5 volts, you'll need to do some logic level shifting to get the voltage down to 3.3. By the time you've graduated from your Uno in your starter kit, this probably won't be a problem. Finally, we have the Lilypad Arduino, and this is a bit of a weird one really. It's a 5 centimeter circular board, and instead of pins or sockets that you can push pins into, it has pads, and these are designed to be sewn with conductive thread, so it's really for wearable projects. The Lilypad uses the same processor as the Uno, so much of the code is portable. Just upload it to this and it'll work fine. The only problem is the Lilypad doesn't come with a USB connection, so you need a separate FTDI breakout like this, which gives you a USB port so you can plug in and program. If you buy the Lilypad 368 version, You'll find that the pins are 5-volt tolerant, so otherwise it's exactly the same as working with an Arduino Uno. Lastly, I wanted to add a quick note about the new generation of non-Atmel based boards. The Arduino Yun, for instance, is a curious Linux combined with Arduino, as well as Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on the same board. These bear more resemblance to a Raspberry Pi, but with a whole lot less community support and a much bigger price tag. The Arduino Yun is about $75. My advice, just steer clear of these new boards. They're simply overpriced for their intended Internet of Things applications. You'd be much better off with a little NodeMCU dev board for $4. Or even consider a $35 Raspberry Pi if you need that full Linux stack to play with. So those are the boards that as a beginner I think you'll be most interested in or interested in upgrading to next after you've finished with your Uno. In most cases for simple prototyping, I still keep around a bunch of simple Unos. They get the job done and they're cheap and they're easy to work with. If you need more space for code or more ports, then upgrade to a Mega 2560. If you're ready to embed your project, or if you want to make it really small, then you can always consider a Nano. But if you like the small form factor and would also like to play around with something that can become a USB device, definitely consider the Pro Micro. For wearables, the Lilypad is a great option. You can sew straight onto it with conductive thread. And finally, for Internet of Things based projects, I really can't recommend the NodeMCU enough. It's so cheap to get something that will connect straight to Wi-Fi in a couple of lines of code, so you can get something really cool working really quickly. That's it from me. Thank you for watching, and for more weekly technology tutorials, reviews and giveaways from makeuseof.com, please subscribe to this channel.